Greg McElroy is here. This is a crossover event, always college football, and this is football. What's going on, Greg?
What's going on, buddy? How we doing?
I'm really excited for this. You host one of my favorite podcasts long before I was a part of the Omaha universe. I'll ask this. Do you like draft season? I know you like college football a lot more than you like the NFL. Do you like the crossover part of it?
I personally love it. Having lived it, I loved it a little less. Uh, you know, when I was a kid, like I remember, so my dad worked for the Cowboys, and I
Yeah.
remember dad when I was like a sophomore in high school taking me into the war room, and I don't know how dad got access to it. Like he probably pulled out like probably hit all of his sales goals that year. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So like, hey, here's your reward. You can bring your son to the war room. And it was the most exhilarating experience of my life. Now,
Mm.
we ultimately ended up drafting a good friend of mine, but not the player I wanted us to draft at the time. We drafted Bobby Carpenter. Um,
Mm.
so, uh, Granted, at the time, I had wanted, I was a quarterback, like go get a quarterback, go get a receiver, whoever it was. I don't remember who I wanted. But we took Bobby Carpenter, and it was like one of the greatest. Phones are going off. It's just insane. So I loved the draft during that process. As a player, I hated it, but now has kind of grown to love it as quarterbacks have become such a huge priority at the top of the
Yeah.
draft board, and that's the position I know the best.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, as a player, why did you hate it? Like, what part of the process were you like, okay, I really don't want to do this, or was it just you just don't like the over analysis of yourself?
No, I didn't. That didn't bother me as much. It's the only time in my life when I genuinely felt like a piece of meat. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, all right, well, your knees, your ankles are bad. Go get an MRI. Like you at the combine, you feel like you're a cattle that's being prodded around. Like, all right, now you go take your Wonderlic. Now you're going to go do MRIs. Now you're going to go get seen by the other six doctors because they break you up into rooms of five doctors or so, five or six doctors. So you're
Mhm.
getting like tugged and pulled on, and your ankles and your elbows, like full checkup from every single team doctor. So that's the part of the combine that nobody sees. By the time you get to the field, you'd already done like, gosh, 48 hours worth of medical
Yeah.
tests and interviews. So it was the only time in my life where I felt like it wasn't about you, the person. No, 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 no. It's about whether or not your body is capable of handling the NFL. So that was a little strange for me. And then I broke my hand in the Senior Bowl, so that wasn't
Mm.
very fun either. I wasn't really able to do much in the pre-draft process, and got a little frustrated as I got passed on the board by a couple guys as a result. But either way, man, like looking back on it, I ended up where I needed to end up, and ended up having the short career that I always envisioned.
Well, I will say, like the piece of meat thing is fascinating because it's true. Where for me, the most frustrating part, if I was a player, is 3 years of tape goes away in an instant. And like you look at someone like Keon Coleman, or
Yeah.
where it's like, and obviously now we have the gauntlet drill, so we can see it a little bit. But like Keon Coleman has so much tape, he runs a slow 40, and there's like half of draft Twitter is like, well, there goes
Yeah.
that. And it's like, wait a second, hold on. Like I watched Keon Coleman for a bunch of years. He had LSU DBs in hell, and now it's like, oh no, he's off my board. It's just so funny how tape can be rendered irrelevant so quickly on 4 days in Indianapolis.
Especially too, like Keon Coleman's a great example. Like, all right, I don't care what he ran on the 40. Like, I remember this process
Right.
vividly, and I remember we were brought into the draft process one time as players, and I remember we were sitting there, and it was 2012. I was at the Jets, and we were given an assignment in the off season to go through and hey, let's look at wide receivers. Like, we need a wideout. Like, we need a guy. We had just lost. Well, Santonio Holmes was back, but we had
Right.
lost Plaxico. We had lost Derek Mason the year before. We had Jeremy Curley. And we had a couple guys, but we didn't have a real deep receiver room. Like, we knew receiver was going to be a priority for us. Dustin Keller was there as well at tight end, and Jeff Cumberland. But we knew that we were going to go after some weapons. And we started looking through the draft prospects, and we started watching the tape. And Mark had guys, I had guys. Tebow arrived a little later. He had guys. Like, we all watched them, and I remember sitting there and banging the drum for Alshon Jeffrey. Like, dude, I'm telling you, this guy. We played him 2 years ago. He was the best player on the field. I don't care if he runs a 4.7. I could care less. Like, Alshon Jeffrey is the guy we need. Like Tone will take the top off the defense. We have speed guys. We're fine. We need that possession guy at X that's going to be just a handful. And Alshon would have been a perfect fit for that. Instead, we took Stephen Hill, because
Right.
Stephen Hill went out and blew the combine away, and he was going to be the next Megatron because he was from Georgia Tech and he was the world's greatest
Yeah,
kid. Like I
remember
love
that.
Stephen Hill still to this day,
Yeah.
like a great, great dude. Um, but it's like we get so enamored with measurables and what you run.
Yep.
Look at the tape and go off of the productivity on the tape. And Keon Coleman, he's a perfect example. The guy had how many contested catches in his career? Like nobody had more contested
Yeah.
catch touchdowns in the last 3 years in college football than Keon Coleman. And yet he's just the bottom is falling out because he didn't run a good 40. It just doesn't make sense to me.
He also was so unathletic, they let him return kicks, and he basically had the game-winning return against
Yeah,
Miami. So
at
that's
Florida
the
State
the staff
too.
obviously knew
At
how
Florida
unathletic he
State.
was.
Like if he's the best,
Yeah.
Florida State's got weapons galore. Like you're telling me that's the most athletic and most sudden guy they have? Like perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, I'll take my chances on him for sure.
Yeah. So I want to talk about quarterbacks here because I'm fascinated by a bunch of stuff with quarterbacks, but I'll start here. Like in the Caleb Williams evaluation, I've gotten maybe I'm just have PTSD after the Zach Wilson eval where he held onto the ball forever, and then he starts facing defensive fronts in the NFL, and he can't do anything. Literally, can't throw the ball past the line of scrimmage with any value whatsoever. And it's funny to me because, and I've told the story before, but I was looking at Caleb Williams before this season, and I saw that he held onto the ball for I think 4.5 seconds on average before he threw. So I'm like, well, that's way too long. He's a bust. I looked it up. Mahomes, 4.5 seconds at Texas Tech. That's what they do. That's just the college game. And so it's hard for me to say, okay, I know he's going to play against this front well because it's just the game speeds up, and you really have no idea if a guy's going to be able to process at that high level. You have Mahomes is the best ever. Zach Wilson is not. I'm curious when you're just looking at it, and I have another theory that's probably crackpot too, which is that these guys are comfortable holding onto the ball longer because they never got punished for it because the way the rules have changed, where you just kind of if you held onto the ball for 4 seconds in 1999, you were going to be out for a month. But it's just a little bit of a different game. But anyway, I'll start and give you the floor here. The traits you look for, where you say this is an NFL quarterback. Where do you start, Greg?
I think the number one most important thing by a mile is accuracy. I don't care about arm strength as much as others. People get enamored with it. I think in some ways, arm strength can work against you because you think you can get away with more. But the guys that have a natural understanding of how to anticipate to me is really valuable. And I also think because of, and this was a difficult transition for me as a player, and I think it's a difficult transition. Like the better your team is around you, compared to the competition that you're playing against, the more challenging it might be. Because if you're
Mm,
operating from a clean pocket 85% of the time in college, in the NFL, you'll be lucky to operate from a clean pocket 45%. Like you're going to have to move, you're going to have to throw off your spot, you're going to have to be able to deliver the football while getting hit without allowing your accuracy to drop off. So I think by a mile, accuracy number one, and pocket awareness is number two. I don't think there's now if you have a big arm, can you overcompensate? Yes. If you have unbelievable athletic ability, can that help you out? Sure. There are other variables that can affect you in a positive way, and I just kind of look back at the guys that have had success recently in the league. They were amazing in the pocket in college football. Like Joe Burrow,
mhm.
not a big arm, but through a tremendous accuracy, anticipation, and is unbelievable in the pocket and moving one step, step up, throw, one step up, throw, retreat, step over, throw. I mean, he's really good at being able to negotiate defenders in the pass rush without allowing his eyes to drop. And in college, man, those eyes drop and you can get away with it because you're probably more athletic. In the NFL, it's just not happening. So I love Caleb Williams as a player. I think he's excellent. I am a little bit troubled by how often he plays off script. And
Mm.
everyone's looking for the next Mahomes, right? I get that. Everyone wants the next Mahomes because he's rare. He can take what if Andy Reid calls a god awful play, Patrick Mahomes can make it right. And guess what? Andy Reid, albeit one of the best play callers of all time, Matt Nagy, one of the best play callers, in that system, in a long time. Even Eric Bieniemy before that, like really, really good offensive minds. The best in the business is going to call a terrible play 6, 7 times a game. It's just, I mean, just
Yep.
statistically speaking, they're going to call a play that doesn't work, or they're going to call a play that the defense is prepared for. And even in the event in which the defense wins, Patrick Mahomes can make you right. I think Caleb Williams has similar qualities from a skill set standpoint. He's very accurate. He's got more than enough arm, but I think he lives improvisationally a little more than I'd like. I would like for him to stay in structure a little bit more. I'd like for him to be a little bit more true to staying in rhythm within the passing game as opposed to freelancing and kind of making a play. So that's something that concerns me. But the number one thing that concerns me most about Caleb Williams, I look at all the players that have been drafted number one, number two, number three, way up there near the top of the draft. And seldom are the guys that ultimately go on to become elite players. Every single one of them has a gigantic chip on their shoulder. Like they're mad at the world, or they create some type of false narrative about themselves that people don't believe in them. Caleb Williams has never had that. I mean, Caleb Williams, from the time he stepped on campus at Oklahoma to the time he stepped on campus at SC, he has never experienced adversity. Very little adversity as far as how he was received and how he was portrayed as the next best guy. Even when they went 7-6 this year, or 6-6 or whatever, 7-5, it wasn't
Mhm.
because of Caleb. I mean, he did his part, and he did, and a lot of that is true. But I do wonder about, is there a sense of entitlement? Is there that chip on the shoulder that's going to keep him going 10, 12 years down the road, the way it does Mahomes, who's still pissed that he got drafted 10th? Like, still to this day is mad
Yeah.
about that. Tom Brady, who still, you're too old, you're too slow. You can't, I mean, all those guys find that internal, they're almost a little crazy. Just be
Yep.
real. You got to be a little crazy to be elite. Peyton Manning still pissed he never won the Heisman Trophy. Still pissed that he was even in discussion with Ryan Leaf to be number one, and it propelled him to become one of the best we've ever seen. So I think the chip on the shoulder aspect is something that I've valued more in recent years, and I'm just not 100% sure that Caleb Williams has that.
Can you develop that? I mean, one of the things with Mahomes, we had Mitch Schwartz on a couple weeks ago and we were asking about it, and he was basically saying he'll find anything. He will find one tweet, from Joe Blow 420, and he'll say, "Oh my God, they hate me." And I'm just curious, like, do you think? I mean, going to the Bears, there's going to be questions, like, or do you think that it's really, as Bill Parcells famously said, if he doesn't bite as a puppy, he won't bite as a dog. Do you think that there's a way you can flip that switch, especially if he has adversity, maybe his rookie year?
No, I think that I don't think that's something that just comes natural to a lot of people. Um,
Hmm.
if you've been told how great you are your whole life, and no one has ever questioned your skill set, no one's ever questioned your ability, and you frankly have never really experienced personal adversity, then I think that's a tough thing to manufacture.
Hmm.
And while I think, here's the problem with Caleb Williams: if you don't take him number one and he goes on to become an elite player, your career's over. Like, you know what I mean? Now, if
Yeah.
now you look at the Jets is a good example. All right, hey, you take Zach Wilson. Hey, it's his fault that it didn't work out. It's Zach Wilson's fault.
Right.
And while the Jets might shoulder some of the blame, because I think there was a time there where, not a great offensive line, not maybe the weapons were less than stellar. They had other challenges within his own development, but people kind of blame the player if it doesn't work out. No one blames the San Diego Chargers that it didn't work out for Ryan Leaf. You know, I think you I think you almost are offered a blanket of security if you take the guy with the highest ceiling. And if it doesn't work out for
Mm.
Caleb Williams, ultimately that's going to fall on Caleb Williams, not so much the organization in some cases, and maybe not so much the GM, but more maybe the coaching staff or the quarterback coach, the
Right.
offensive coordinator, or what you did or didn't surround him with. So um, I think you have to take Caleb Williams, because in the event in which you passed on him and he goes on to become the next Mahomes, you're dead. You're absolutely dead. So I think that's the challenge when you have a guy that does have this many God given gifts. You have to take him, and you just hope that the mental makeup is there alongside the physical makeup, because playing quarterback in the NFL is half mental and half physical, I believe. I really think if you're going to be an elite player, you have to be so cerebral, edge, uh, tenacious competitor, crazy tough, while also having all the physical attributes that would make you elite as well.
Why should you bet with Caesars Sportsbook? 2 words: Caesars Rewards. Every bet brings you closer to the types of benefits only Caesars can offer. Hotel stays, VIP experiences, sports and concert tickets, and more. It's not just an app, it's an empire. Who would you take it to?
I would take Jayden Daniels. Um, Look, I think Drake Maye, and I remember we did Drake Maye's game, done a handful of his games over the years, and you just get, first of all, you love the kid. Uh,
Mhm.
just sitting with him, he's got a gregarious personality. He just kind of has got a bit of a, some guys, like I'm sure you've sat down, like there's just some guys that have like a gravitational pull. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like that's
Yeah.
kind of Drake Maye. Like, man, I want to play for this guy. Like I want this guy to be in the huddle, and I'm going to give it everything I got to make sure that this guy's life is easier. Like he has that. But I do think there are a couple questions about the inconsistencies. I do think his eyes drop from time to time when he's in the pocket. I don't like this whole I think the narrative surrounding him being unathletic is a false narrative. I
Mm.
think he's very and when you see, he's a big kid too, so he's big and sturdy and put together. But his whole thing, he's not athletic. He's athletic. He's not Lamar, but like if we're qualifying athleticism as like Lamar Jackson, then nobody's athletic. All right, nobody. So I look at where things are with his evaluation, and I think that he's getting knocked for a few things, but I don't think his ceiling is as high as Jayden Daniels. And much like we just discussed with Caleb Williams, like I have to draft ceiling to an extent. You almost have to. And if it doesn't work, hey, 3 years from now, we'll do it again. But I'm going for the Mahomes. I'm not looking for the next Kirk Cousins. While Kirk is amazing, he's a great player, super efficient, highly productive. The guy that's going to get me over the hump potentially is a guy like Mahomes. So I got to find the next best thing. And I look at Jayden Daniels and his progression, where he was at Arizona State, where I do think he was probably unfairly characterized as a guy that was just a runaround guy and an athletic guy. When you actually watched him, his feet were set at Arizona State. He was really accurate. The problem is they just weren't set enough. He was a little bit hodgepodge and didn't have a great team. And I think he tried to do way too many things on his own. Didn't delegate. Like I have a 5-year-old and we're watching the movie where The Rock is the quarterback of the Boston Rebels. Have you ever seen this movie?
I know what you're talking. It's what's it
I
called?
don't remember.
Yes, I have. Anyway,
Whatever it
I'll
is,
look it
we've
up.
watched that movie 17 times in the last 2 weeks. So our
Game plan. The
the
game
game
plan.
plan. So my son's heavy into that. Like I feel like Jayden Daniels was The Rock at the beginning of that movie. And then he became a great teammate, started to delegate and started to
Yeah.
like, oh, hey, I don't have to do it all myself. Like I can delegate and give it up to other people. And that's kind of what Jayden Daniels was. Just tried to do way too much on his own
Yeah.
at Arizona State, got to LSU, still tried to do way too much on his own in the first 5 or 6 games. And then finally started to say, all right, I'm going to play in structure a little bit more. I'm gonna just take what the defense gives me. It's try to sit in a home run over and over again. Like, hey, I can take this 8-yard out and make it 2nd and 2. That's fine. And I think he understood, all right, that's the next step of my progression is delegating responsibility, letting my teammates do the work for me and me just being a distributor. So he grew tremendously in 2022. And then fast forward to 2023 and the deep ball accuracy got ridiculous. And then I think the pinpoint NFL level throws became more and more consistent. Now, part of my concern is that he had an elite supporting cast. And I look too, and the fact that Brian Thomas is skyrocketing is not that surprising for me. Just with his top end speed, the way he can track the ball too, if it's slightly off target. And then Malik Neighbors, we knew Malik Neighbors was a dude. So him being way at the top of the draft with where the NFL has gone is not at all surprising. Just his ability to play inside and out. I mean, I love Malik Neighbors. I think he's a great, great player. But I think that there is a little concern there, but the top end speed, the ability to create with his legs in the event in which something's not there. And I'm not talking create like get you 6 or 7 to keep you honest. I'm talking take it 40 and score. The one thing about his mobility, he runs a little upright and he's not afraid to take a hit, which he needs to stop doing that. Like stop running upright and just slide. There is no sign of
Yeah.
weakness than, to slide. But I do think there's progress to be made there. But his escapability is really good. And I think the pinpoint accuracy is really good. And just the way he's improved so significantly over the last 4 years is something that gives me a lot of optimism as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're gonna let you go, but the Daniel Jeremiah did a podcast after Mahomes eruption, and they said, "Why did we miss on him?" And one of the things that applies to Daniels, but also applies to Caleb Williams, is they didn't realize their defense was so bad that they felt they had to that Mahomes had to put his team on his back all the
Yeah,
time. So he would try to hit the home run every single time, and it's like if you don't have to do that with Andy Reid with that Chiefs defense, it's a totally different ballgame. So you
totally.
kind of you have to project sometimes and be like, okay, is he trying to do too much because he has to do too much, which is a fascinating thing. Greg McElroy, thank you so much for on This Is Football, buddy.
This is great. Thanks again, Cap.